Hey guys, welcome to this evening's special live stream. I've got my two good buddies in the house, the real estate experts themselves, Mr. Jason Hartman and Ken McElroy.
Cheers.
Cheers.
And we're drinking beer. This is happy hour.
That's right. I got a bunch of people coming over for the Conor McGregor fight tonight. I cannot wait. UFC 257. But Jason, this was your brainchild, getting us together to talk some real estate, some macro, and get everyone here on a live stream. So thank you very much for bringing us all together, buddy.
Hey, my pleasure. My pleasure. It was Ken's suggestion. He says, "Why don't we all get together for a beer?" And I said, "Why don't we just make it a live stream?" So here we are.
Yeah. Very cool.
It's great.
Yeah. Okay, so Jason, what do you want to do, buddy? You got a couple charts. You want to go right to the questions? What do you feel like?
Yeah, well, let's do. I'm not ready on my charts, but I got a housing supply chart you guys will totally want to comment on. So I definitely want to share that with you in the audience, and a couple other things. So let me get those prepped here.
So Ken, what's your take on end of 2021? Are you still kind of thinking we might see some little downward pressure on residential?
Yeah, well, it depends on where. Obviously, we're seeing big bubbles in some areas, as you know, as a result of people moving out of the core. But yeah, I think, this is interesting. I think for the first time, we're going to see technology really change the way real estate, is going to end up. Obviously, before everybody, you think about it, we had it before, but everybody's still driving into town, going into these buildings, and now, that's all just dispersed. Yeah. So it's creating little bubbles all over the place, but also some problems in others. And I know Jason and I have talked a lot about this. It's going to be interesting.
Yeah, technology is really changing everything for sure.
Ken, what would you do right now if you were just the average Joe? You had let's say $250,000, $300,000 house, and you were really worried about the economy. You felt as though the housing market in your area was kind of like a bubble. And what the hell do you do? Do you do like but let's say, you got a wife and kids and they don't want to move and your wife really doesn't want to rent. I mean, do you do like a 30-year fixed cash out refi and try to put that equity to work someplace else to limit your downside there? Or, I mean, what the hell do you do?
Yeah, it's a great question. I actually do think that, George, we've talked a lot about inflation. I can't wait to get into that discussion with you. But I think if you can fix, other people's money or, bank money at, say sub 3, long term, you're going to be well below inflation, coming up into that. So the Fed's basically going to pay off your mortgage for you. It's just going to erode that debt. Yeah. So I think so. Usually, I'm a little, I have a little different viewpoint on that, but with the amount of money that people, that the Fed's throwing into the economy and still will, I can't see how we're not going to have inflation. So I've been telling people to, ratchet up that debt a little bit more, scoop some of that those low price dollars, and have them as reserves, just in case, especially if, they don't exactly know, what's going to be happening next year with their employer or their business. And, there's millions of people dealing with that.
Yeah, that's interesting you say that, Ken, because there's a lot of financial advisors have used this story known as the tale of two brothers. If you just search that, don't Google it because they're evil, but just search it on a search engine, not a brand name search engine, DuckDuckGo maybe. And they use this thing called the tale of two brothers. It talks about one that levered up and didn't have much equity in his home. And then the other who seemingly did the right thing and paid off his house. And then they both lost their job and the country went into a recession. And the guy with the leverage, counterintuitively, was so much better off because he had cash. It was out of the property. He had the cash available to him. And the other guy thought he was doing the right thing by paying down the mortgage, having equity. And as soon as he lost his job, nobody would refi the house.
Right.
So he couldn't get that equity out. It was trapped. And if he couldn't pay his tax bill or his HOA, or, if he had a small mortgage balance, that high amount of equity in his property actually made him a target for a predatory lender in a foreclosure, right?
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Yeah. It's counterintuitive.
Yeah. George, the big boys, the private money, the private equity groups and the institutional money, they're going to safe, havens, and, they're put, as they're loading up on cash reserves. And, the individual should do the exact same thing. Just nobody knows what's really going to happen.
Yeah, it's tough because, you think we're going into an inflationary environment, but it's like the smartest thing to do is hold cash, but then you're losing purchasing power if the price of goods and services goes up. It's this catch-22. I saw someone in the comments talk about Rickards, and he was on with Robert the other day.
Yeah, I just had him on last week. Yeah,
Kiyosaki. And I know Rickards is talking about deflation, but I've listened to a lot of what Rickards is saying. Be very careful with that, because when Rickards is talking about deflation, I think he's talking about asset deflation. He's talking about bonds potentially going back down to maybe, the 30-year getting under 1%, call it 50 basis points, something like that. I don't think he's talking about the prices of the groceries you buy going down in price. I don't think he's talking about your healthcare bill going down, your kids' college education going down. There's a big difference. Most people in the financial world, when they talk about deflation, they're really talking about asset prices. They aren't necessarily talking about the stuff that most people actually care about. So I always use the example of the 1970s, and we all know we had considerable price inflation there with consumer goods and services, but the stock market went down from 72 to 74 in nominal terms by 50%. So adjusted for inflation, a lot more than that. And that's an example of we like to paint inflation and deflation with this broad stroke, and it just doesn't work like that. The devil's in the details, and it's a very nuanced topic. And then you combine the FX market on top of that, and it makes it even more complex.
No question about it. But, George, yes, cash is susceptible to bad things in an inflationary environment for sure. It gets stronger and more valuable in a deflationary environment, as we all know. But, maybe it's not have it in cash. It's just have it where it's liquid within a couple of days, right? Which is definitely not in the property. And that's why I just don't favor holding a lot of equity in properties. There's only a few times where I think that's good. Like if you just have cash to park, too much cash, you don't have time to invest it, which is a bad problem, but it's admittedly a problem a lot of people have. And you can stick that money in a state, in a property in a state that has really good homestead laws, then it's pretty protected, right? So Texas and Florida come to mind there. Other states are reasonably desirable. California's terrible, of course. But you can put it in the S&P, right? I mean, if there's inflation, your stocks are probably going to do okay, right?
Yeah, well, they might not, though. Going back to the 70s, I think if you just keep it simple, I think it might work out from the standpoint, like what I'm doing right now personally, and what we're talking about in my member forum and what I've been talking about on my channel is a lot to do with commodities and obviously gold. You guys have heard me say many times before, I set up my portfolio in like a 10-80-10 split. So you got 10% gold, 80% in things that pay you to own them, such as real estate or dividend paying stocks. And you've got 10% kind of speculative stuff. Well, as of right now, in that 80%, I've got quite a few commodities that are paying me to own them. So I think commodities, if you're losing purchasing power on your cash, you're most likely going to be making money on those commodities.
Which commodities?
With me personally?
Yeah, well, or any recommendations. I mean, you don't have to tell your exact personal stuff if you don't want to, but
yeah, we've been in Rebel Capitalist Pro. We've been talking about uranium. Mm-hmm. We've been talking about nickel. We've been talking about gold. We've been talking about coal, metallurgic coal. And, I bought a lot of those stocks back in March. And, everyone's talking about Tesla and whatnot. Some of those stocks that I know Chris, my buddy Chris McIntosh, bought for his hedge fund are some coal stocks. Coal, like the black, ugly stuff that everyone hates.
You would think under Biden that's not going to be so good, right?
Well, no, but see, you're looking at the demand side of the equation.
Yeah. Okay.
So what I would say to that, my rebuttal is, okay, yes, there's going to be lower demand, but let's talk about supply.
Mm-hmm.
Is anybody going to put capital to work in building a new coal mine?
No.
You see, so you've got this argument where if supply goes down a lot faster because it's persona non grata in the investment community, then you still could have prices go up. But my point is, even if you got a pile of cash, if you've also got some gold, and if you also have some commodities that are paying you to own them, or maybe if you got some real estate where you find a motivated seller and you force some appreciation through a remodel or repurposing the property, or doing what Ken does, where he improves the property and increases rents, then you've got, and like Jason, what you guys said, you got packaged commodities that are paying you to own them. And I would argue that the housing most likely would go up or down. I'm not going to say with inflation, but it would be more aligned, where stocks, the S&P, I think you might have some problems there unless you own those commodity producers. And I think that the commodities are pretty much the ultimate hedge against inflation. But you see how you got cash, you got gold, you got commodities, you got real estate. I don't think you're going to, you might not get rich, but you're not going to go broke.
Right.
Cash position.
Yeah. Hey, George, I got a chart for you on that. Can you put my screen up?
Yeah.
Yeah. You guys will both like this, and Ken will just go like, yes, tell me about it when he sees this.
Let me see if I can pull this off your application window.
Yeah. No, you don't need to change the window or anything. Just allow the stream, and then there you go. You got it. So this is softwood lumber prices. Ken, this doesn't surprise you one bit, does it?
On one project, that we're doing, our lumber bid was $1 million higher.
And $1 million higher on one apartment complex
300
versus what's the total lumber budget? Like, give us compared to what?
It was about 25% higher.
Wow. Can you imagine? I mean, everybody listening, can you imagine what that does to home prices? And, when those construction costs go up, and it's not just lumber, right, Ken?
Packaged commodities, buddy. Packaged commodities.
Yeah, it's a lot of things. We're also having spikes in PVC, and there's supply chain issues, as you know, is part of this. But it's interesting. I was talking to some friends of mine that were buying some of these low-priced homes up in Idaho, and the builder won't even allow it. Basically, before they said, yeah, we'll you can buy this house and then we'll build it for you. Now they're saying, no, because these prices are going up, so they can't manage that 7-8 month lag on a new home. They said you could put a deposit on it, but we need to settle on the pricing later because of these exact issues.
Yeah, it's incredible what's happening. So let me just see if you guys agree with this on this chart, okay? So the way I read this chart, and we've got a client who's buying properties from us, and he is a lumber supplier. So, he brokers big lumber shipments to home builders, and he was on the podcast maybe a month and a half ago. But he keeps sending me his insider newsletter, which is called Random Lengths, which is about the lumber industry.
Right.
And what I see that happened here is just what Ken said. Here, we saw the supply chain problem with the sort of the first really bad part of the pandemic, supply being hit. And George talks a lot on his show about supply demand shock, which is a really interesting concept. And then, we saw the prices peak here, and then the supply started to come back online. But then, there's so much construction demand, and that's kind of how I read this chart. I don't know if you guys will agree.
But what do you think? I mean, is that I totally get the demand side of the equipment, like more demand, but could it be also that a lot of the lumber companies just went bust and that they're not coming back?
I don't know if any of them went bust. I know that some closed down.
So what I was told is that there were some issues getting lumber out of Canada.
Yeah.
And then also,
British, yeah.
I was also told, although I've heard the other side of this too, that they were saying those wildfires and all that stuff that we had kind of also contributed to part of this. Now that seems, maybe that's not entirely true, but for sure the issues between the countries there's an affordability problem we have right now, and there's a housing issue as a result of low supply. So this could continue to go up based on whatever happens over the next year to two.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, we've got almost 1,250 people.
Yeah, and we've got, and that's awesome. Welcome, everybody.
Thanks for hanging out with us. We'll get to some questions really soon. If you guys have any friends that are interested in real estate, give them a call and tell them to jump on right now, because this is a real treat to get to talk to Jason Hartman and Ken McElroy, that's for sure. But Ken, oh shoot, sorry. Let me ask the question. I got to get my door. But he'll probably.
Everybody's coming over for George's party now.
Yeah. By the way, Ken, I don't know what you're doing, but if you're in the area, you're more than welcome to come over.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
See, I'm not local. Darn it.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say something inappropriate. I'll tell you when we get off air. It's kind of an inside joke there. But anyway, why aren't people building right now? I mean, the prices are going up. We know the cure for high prices are high prices.
Yeah.
So why aren't the big guys like you out there buying quote unquote affordable housing and making all the money? Or do you hate more people?
I bet his answer is he wants to buy every piece of land he can find, but
I'm trying, man. I'll tell you what,
it's so competitive.
We're making at least 1 or 2 offers a week on land, and it is jumping off the charts right now. Yeah. And the other thing that's happening is we're seeing, there's the lenders, they're being a little bit more frugal on the loan to values, and they have what's called COVID reserves now.
So what does that mean? You've got to have to build the project. You've got to have more money in reserve than you did before.
Yeah. So they're lending less. So your loan to values would be less. So your equity would be more. The land prices are going up. The construction prices are going up. So, they're looking at all of that. And so they're being much more conservative.
How conservative, Ken? I mean, what happened to those loan to value ratios with the COVID reserves, or how much more do you have to put aside on a project?
Well, in the 200 to 300 unit apartments, which is what we do.
Folks, just so you know, Ken McElroy is the original god here. Okay, he builds big stuff. Okay, big institutional grade stuff. Go ahead, Ken.
Yeah. So George, we were talking about how we're trying to get loans. Well, we are getting loans, but they have this new line item called a COVID reserve. And so a lot of the lenders, these lenders, they're not just doing single family. Of course, you have lenders, so they're taking it in the shorts on commercial office or self-storage or retail, and some of the other things, even some multifamily, and single family would be basically a piece of what they're lending. And so we're starting to see these COVID reserves on a deal that we just got priced this week. We had eight different pricings, and the COVID reserves were anywhere from 800,000 to $1.2 million in reserve. So that's extra cash that you got to give to the lender. But
Ken, what's the percentage of extra? How much? I mean, when you talk dollars, we got to have a reference point.
Yeah. Okay. It's basically a year of mortgage payments.
Okay. So in other words, before you didn't have to have any, you had to have some mortgage reserves before, right?
It depended on the deal, but typically not. Typically, they have a loan to value, and then they have a debt coverage ratio that when they look at your net operating income. But now they have another COVID reserve, basically a year of mortgage payments sitting aside. So essentially, you got to put $1 million with the lender. They hold it. After a year of performance,
they'll let it go.
Release it. Yeah, and in some cases, it's stage releases.
Yeah, wow. And so that's $1 million in this example. And how much did you have to put into that property total to do it?
That was a $50 million development deal, 20 million of equity, and 30 million of construction debt.
Okay, so it's 20 million in, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's an extra 1 million, so it's 21 million in versus 20.
You got it. Exactly right.
That's not going to like kill your project, though.
No. But it's what I'm saying is that I guess it's reserves are something that lenders do, and we've bought broken properties before, and we put up reserves before, so that's not unusual. But now it's called a COVID reserve, and it's kind of across the board. So before it was case by case, now it's just a thing. And at the moment, people they're uncertain, what's going to happen when the Fed stops propping everything up.
Yeah. And that's a good question.
People are asking what the hell is going on at my place. I got all these people walking by.
We can't hear any noise back there, George.
I got to, tell me if I could turn off my mic. But I got a bunch of people coming over for the UFC fight. So I just had my good buddy Josh show up with his girlfriend Callie and his son Jet. I think he brought over a buddy, and I got some buddies of mine coming over, and I got some gals coming over, and just a bunch of people. So if you see just chaos in the background.
No, that's good. It makes it interesting.
Yeah. I'm trying to keep it fun.
Hey, you can pull my slide down in a minute, but I put a new slide up. I'll just show you this one before you do that, and you can enlarge our picture.
You want this one, right? The pending sale.
This one is different than the other one. This is pending home sales. Okay, and I mean, look at how bullish the market is right now. It's absolutely en fuego, like George on his show likes to say, it's in the no bueno zone. Well, this is en fuego. It's on fire. Pending sales are up 32% from a year earlier. And you can just see the chart. I mean, it's, 4-week rolling average of weekly pending home sales. If we had triple the inventory of properties, we would sell triple the number of properties. There is literally, like, we almost never have a property that goes unsold now in our network. So we've got, deals nationwide in different markets we like, and people buy everything. There's nothing is left.
What do you think? I was listening to Gunlock the other day, and he was pointing out how the lower end of the economic totem pole in our society has been disproportionately affected by these lockdowns as far as jobs, because the main jobs that have been put out of commission are service jobs, like retail, food, and whatnot. And that's generally the people who are just starting out or might not have a high income. But he was talking about how he sees potentially the job losses going from the bottom of the ladder up to middle management because of the new things that we're doing from home, as far as Zoom and Skype and just this live stream as an example. And he was talking about his hedge fund or his firm that he's let go of several middle managers that were making, solid 6 figures, because now they're working at home. There's just no need. There's just a lot of overkill. And so he thinks that we've seen a wave of unemployment at the lower end, but next, especially we continue these lockdowns, we could see a wave in the kind of the middle class or upper middle class jobs as well.
That's definitely concerning. But George, let me ask you, why is it just the fact that they're working remotely makes their job unnecessary?
Well, in Gunlock's case, he said he just found out how unnecessary all of these middle managers were.
Yeah,
it kind of just shed light on the inefficiencies that he had within the organization that he just didn't realize. Now, obviously, that's an anecdotal case. But one thing that I would argue is I was reading a statistic the other day that 60% of the businesses that went into lockdown or got closed as a result of lockdowns are not coming back. And these are small businesses. And that's a big number. You've got 100, 200,000 small businesses across the United States closing. That's not just going to affect the lower end of the totem pole. That's going to affect the middle class, upper middle class. When you consider the driver of our economy, especially with job growth, are those small and mid-sized businesses.
No, I agree. There's a lot of devastation we have not seen yet. The question is, where does the devastation go? Why don't you put our turn off my screen share, George, so you can make our pictures better? I don't want to.
I'll just comment on what George said. George, I've talked to a number of guys that there's a couple things that have happened. One is revenues are down. Let's just face it, for most people, a lot of people, revenues are down. So as we got pushed out to, telework and all that, you naturally start to look for ways to cut or save on expenses when revenues are down. And so that was one thing that I kept hearing reoccurring over and over and over and over. The other one was, if you've got a hierarchy of, let's say, 5 deep, you don't need that anymore with Zoom.
Right.
More efficient.
People are home. And so we did a Zoom, we did a state of the company address. We had 100 people on, and, we were all on Zoom. And so the communication and all that stuff is so much better, and the technology's there. Before, it was all kind of room to room, meeting to meeting and conference to conference.
Right.
So what people are seeing, Ken, is that, the businesses are getting the benefit of this increased efficiency. And I mean, can you imagine the corporate travel budgets that have just gone from, super expensive to fly these people around, and the meals and the wining and dining? It's like zero. They're saving so much money. So in a lot of ways, I mean, it's good. Those efficiencies will benefit the economy, right?
There's just so many moving parts. I'd be a lot less worried about that if the government wasn't stepping in and the Fed wasn't stepping in and distorting the economy, because then we would have creative destruction, Schumpeter's creative destruction, and the free market would determine which businesses survive, which don't, and which get stronger. Mm-hmm. My concern, and obviously I'm not considering the human element, which is even more important, but just looking at it from the standpoint of the businesses, my concern is that the central planners come in and distort the economy so much that now the winners and losers have nothing to do with free market economics or free market capitalism. And then you get an economy in the future that's far less stable than it was before. And let's remember that before we had 0% interest rates, the Fed doing quantitative easing, the Fed's balance sheet at 4.5 trillion, meaning that before the economy was incredibly unstable. Now it's going to be even more unstable in the future. It's like, man, you hear Janet Yellen, and you hear all these central bankers, and I hear a lot of smart hedge fund guys talk about it too. They talk about the downside to all this money print, or all the government spending, as though it's just the balance sheet. It's just the liabilities of the federal government. Like, that's the only downside. It's just the debt. They don't talk about the downside being in order for the government to achieve that debt, in order for the government to have 27 trillion in debt, or to have 5 trillion in deficit spending just this year, that means there's $27 trillion of economic distortion. It's $27 trillion of malinvestment, of misallocation of resources. And they never look at that side of the equation. They look at government spending as, like I said, as if the only downside is the debt itself and not the government spending it in the first place.
Right. The other thing I heard the other day is, you're going to start to see these lawsuits, obviously, around COVID. I mean, invariably that's going to be a thing. And just like you're going to see on the personal injury side, you're going to see that. And there's almost none medically at the moment. Very, very small. And what they are? They're all around the furlough piece. Because what happened was, that first round of stimulus, I had a number of friends when that went out, and people needed it. Don't get me wrong, but the employees sitting at home for $20 an hour, and they're making choices to not go back. And so businesses during that time, had to do what they had to do to open up or hire people. And so a lot of positions got replaced. And so that's what I'm concerned about with this next round is, it very well, it's going to help people, and it's certainly, they do need it, but what it could do is it could keep everything stagnant again.
Yeah. And see, that's an economic distortion, Ken, you're talking about.
Yeah.
Perfect example of that. Ken, I know whenever I talk to people, especially about real estate, they just automatically assume commercial real estate or maybe retail, I don't know how you guys would classify it, is just done. It's never coming back. You might as well short it. Doesn't matter how cheap it is right now. You just short it and continue to short it because it's not going to exist in 5 years, 10 years. And I know Hartman is really focused on the residential side of the equation. Yeah. You get into multifamily, commercial, retail. From a professional standpoint, do you see any opportunity moving forward?
There's a ton. I would encourage people to go to this, which is this is the Price Waterhouse report that just came out.
Okay.
And what it does is it shows by category. So commercial is obviously industrial, retail, office, but even then it could be class A office, class B, class C. Same thing with industrial, be small or big, and so it's very, very, very different. The winners by a long shot are industrial. So the last mile distribution stuff with the direct to consumer, Amazon, think of Amazon, that's industrial space. You might have 50 or 100 people working in one of those big buildings. It's full of stuff, right? Those are, the data centers, cell towers, manufactured housing doing very well. Apartments are doing pretty well. We are seeing downsizing in office for sure. Retail's definitely in trouble, but not all retail. If it has a grocery store anchor, it seems to be doing okay.
Or like an auto parts store, dry cleaners.
Yeah, Home Depot, Lowe's, the home improvement stuff, all killing it, doing great. So, when you can't really lump commercial into one big category, but there's some, there's some really, really, really robust commercial sectors, that specifically industrial, that's killing it. An area I think that is a big opportunity for in the next 10 years is going to be the redevelopment of the regional malls. And those are...
What's the new use though, Ken? It's hard for me to see that being very economical,
Yeah, they're just...
This at dinner today. He's got a great game plan here.
Yeah. So I think, first of all, corporate headquarters and Amazon are looking at them for distribution. If you think about it,
Amazon's doing the Sears, right? They're taking over the Sears spaces.
Yeah. So we've watched Sears, Macy's, Kmart, all that stuff kind of go down. And we've watched this already with some of those big names that were are dwindling out now. But there's been a number of like Kmart's that have been ripped down, and they have these kind of open air concepts with maybe retail, residential above retail as an example, smaller retail, and with the residential above it, and some other concepts around that. And so I think, the home builders too are going to snap up some of those for sure. They're expensive right now, obviously, but over time they may not be.
Yeah. So Jason, I want to take back just for a moment to kind of something that's applicable to the average everyday real estate investor. And if you could briefly describe just like a 30-second elevator pitch on what you do, and then I would love it if you could tell me what you're seeing as far as your local market specialists,
Sure.
and if they're able to source any deals right now. Because people always ask me from a real estate investing standpoint, well, if the market's in a bubble, is it still a good time to buy? And I'm like, well, you got to be real careful. You got to be cognizant of the fact that most prices are too high, but since real estate is inefficient, you can find a motivated seller. If you can find some good cash flow and use that 30-year fixed rate debt, you could. There is an argument for that. But how are they sourcing deals? Are they like bandit signs, or what is working right now?
Yeah. That's really interesting. So to answer your first question, George, basically what I've been doing for the last 17 years, I had a traditional real estate company. Coldwell Banker bought it. It was in Southern California, in Orange County, California. And after that, I started helping investors buy properties nationwide. And what I would do is I would set up deals with what we call, like you said, local market specialists. And we would sign a referral agreement with them, and then we would refer buyers to them. And interestingly, back in 2003, 2004, 2000, up to maybe 2009, really, we were doing 100% new homes from builders, big home builders. In fact, back in like 2006, maybe it was, my team was the number one home seller in the country for the biggest home builder in the country, then D.R. Horton. We sold so many of their properties to investors. I just couldn't believe it, right? And then I remember, I think it was in 2008 or 9, during the Great Recession, we had this meeting in our office. We had an office back in Costa Mesa back then, Costa Mesa, California. And we had this meeting, and it sounds so funny looking back on it, but we're having this like big discussion. Do you think we should sell resale properties? Do you think we should sell used properties? That like people rehab and fix up. I don't know about that. We just really like these new homes. and it was like such a big deal that we had that conversation looking back on it, because the home builders just stopped. As soon as they got rid of like any existing inventory they had, that machine just came to a halt. Hey, wait, George, hang on. We need sound effects here. It just came to a halt. It went like, no more. and so then the market changed. And from like 2009 on up to, really just kind of, we still do it, but recently, maybe 2 years ago, we were really focusing on rehab properties that were, fix and flips. And these home flippers would flip them to our investors, who would keep them as long-term cash flow holds, right? To just hold for, the long term. And as rental properties. But now it's interesting, we're doing a lot more new construction again. And I guess it's because the flippers, they just can't source deals and make them work and get the appraisals to come in. So we're selling a lot of new properties now in Florida, Alabama, Tennessee, different markets.
I wonder if that's because the local market specialist selling fast. Because the advantage to sell through you, correct me if I'm wrong, is just instant liquidity.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
That would be the upside to working with you. But maybe if they can just get instant liquidity by just selling it themselves, because the market,
they can stick them on the retail market, and that's true. They don't. Sadly, I hate to say this, they don't need us as much as they used to. So, that's a bummer for us. But yeah, no, you're right. There's no question they can get liquidity, but see, on the individual fix and flip deals, they've got to have a foreclosure market. It's not all foreclosures. They'll buy properties that are short sales. They'll buy them right off the MLS. They'll buy foreclosures. And so they don't have that. So all of the inventory being created right now is really being built.
Yeah. Right.
And do you have thoughts on that, by the way?
Yeah, I
Right,
was
right.
just one of the things that I've been seeing is as people exit this market, let's say they sell a home, and do you feel like they're maybe not re-entering it because they feel like it might already be at a peak? In other
As
words,
a
yeah,
owner occupant?
yeah,
No, I mean, I don't work in the owner occupant market directly anymore like I used to. But I think that, assuming, like we've talked about so many times, Ken, assuming those properties are in a suburban market, right, that doesn't have civil unrest and it doesn't have, contagion concerns, and it's not shut down, right? If it's in Phoenix, if it's in a Florida market or whatever, right, those are good markets. Uh, I think people want to hang on to their homes. I think they're just kind of keeping them, and that's
is
part of
that
the problem.
what are so there's a lot of varying opinions as to why supply is low. It's the lowest it's been on record ever.
Yeah.
And which is why I believe the prices are, obviously driving up so much. It's just there's
Right.
I saw a statistic the other day. There was like one house per 6 realtors or something.
Yeah.
Some crazy
Yeah.
crazy number. And so what are you seeing on the supply side? Obviously, we've got the demand.
Yeah, supply is definitely low. There's no question about it. I mean, that's the theme of everything. It's been low for years. I mean, we've been complaining about inventory for, at least 5 years now. Okay,
Do
but it's really, really tight now. So it's worse than
you guys think,
before.
do you guys think that's a fun? By the way, I see a lot of people going back and forth in the comments. I just want to tell a quick story here before I ask that question, and I'm sure I'll forget the question. So the question is, I already forgot. No, the question is, do you think that the inventory is low because of the amount of inventory that's owned by hedge funds and private equity funds? Because they're not going to sell until interest rates go back up, at least on the 10-year, or they can parlay that money into a higher interest rate asset that they're more familiar with. Then the story I was going to
My
say,
answer to that is no. I don't think that's significant. It's a small. I mean, it seems big because when you look at like Invitation Homes or American Homes for Rent, and they have these giant numbers of tens of thousands of houses that they own, but in the overall marketplace, that's nothing. I mean, it's big. Yes, they're huge investors, no question, but compared to the size of the overall market, it's not that big a deal.
yeah. So people are asking what I'm going back and forth about what I'm drinking in the comments here, I see. And so I wanted to tell that quick story that I just went to the store to buy alcohol. And I like those White Claw things. And I was telling
Oh yeah,
Hartman
you're
and
ghetto.
I think that's pretty ghetto. What's funny is I came back, I've been in the United States so long, I didn't even know what these things were because they were out of the country. And my buddy's like, hey, you should try one. They're kind of ghetto, but they're good. So I tried them.
They are good.
That's pretty good. So,
You're going to be drinking Mad Dog 2020
Old English. I'm going to get a 40.
You got to stick it in a bag.
or Schlitz malt liquor.
Yeah.
That's the kind of stuff we used to drink in high school because we had no money. Oh, not that we were drinking in high school, but just saying.
Yeah, exactly. But what was funny is I was going through the cash register or the checkout counter there, and I've got your boxes of the White Claw stuff, and then I got a bottle of all to go along with it.
George is a very versatile guy.
Anyway,
he can hang in the hood or in the upper crust.
That's right, baby.
1%.
That's right. Ken, what do you think about the idea of a lot of the inventory being sucked up by private equity hedge funds? And if you agree with Hartman, why on earth is the inventory? I've been scratching my head on this for so long. Yeah. Why is it just because these builders just hate poor people? Like I said before, they don't want to make any money by providing them housing.
Oh, they can't make the deal work.
I'm joking.
Yeah, affordable housing's been a problem for a long, long time. And one of the things that's very interesting, actually, I was going to show your people on this call, is as you start to see this, like this chart here. This is a little chart These are rent control laws, and states with heavy regulation. So what we're seeing is, you think about it, Oregon passed a statewide rent control law as an example. Well, big money's not going to go there because one, they're raising their taxes on the expense side, and two, they're limiting their income on the red side. And so, managed money is going to find its way to markets that are a little more free. I'm not saying they don't have rent control issues or they don't have affordability issues, but what I'm saying is that the money's going to go to where it goes based on, and I think this is starting to be a lot bigger deal. Before, everybody was kind of a free for all. Now I think you're going to specifically see money go to markets that are going to work a little more with the developers. And that might be with tax incentives to be able to build something, or tax credits, let's say, or, something like that. But that's necessary, George, because the construction costs, let's say, if I'm going to build in Arizona or Nevada or Texas, they're really very similar. And the land might be different. And what's that?
What's your cost per square foot to build new minus the land?
Yeah. So we're building apartments for about $200 a foot, or let's call it 200,000 per unit, brand new. And that's significantly higher than what it was. And
how much has it gone up, and what was it when? Give us a reference.
I built a new build in 2013 or so for like $120, $130 a square foot.
Yeah, it's gone up at least that much. Now, it's been going up since, call it 2015. So this is no surprise for us. The good thing is the prices and the rents have been going up too. So we've still been able to do it. And then interest rates have been going down. So we've been able to borrow cheaper. And so that's what's kind of fueled this up to this point. But the affordability, George, is going to continue to be a problem. It's really difficult to build under those numbers without some city or state, help. And, it's definitely needed. Hopefully there'll be more programs like that.
But the main takeaway there, Ken, is in order for high prices to cure high prices from the standpoint of the builder, we're going to need to see cost per square foot at like $250, $270, something like that, to make sure there's enough margin for builders to make it worth their while.
Yeah, yes, that's true. And they've had these programs in place before, but they're again, you start getting into what's called impact fees. If you want to go build in a city, to plug in their water, sewer, and all that stuff, and the property taxes and all that kind of stuff. They do get in the way. What we've seen just in the last year, Microsoft did a $500 million housing fund. So they're building housing up in Seattle. We've seen Google do that already.
Yeah.
Amazon came out with a $2 billion housing fund to be able to help provide housing for their workers.
Right. So Ken, though, I mean, that's not good, though, is it? No. All that does is bump up the prices. All this new money goes into the market. They just make the price go up.
It's happening, though.
Yeah, I know it's happening. Yeah,
and it's because of the affordability issue.
Right, but it's going to make affordability worse. That's the irony of the whole thing. And it's interesting. You were mentioning they've got this program and that program. What they need is less programs. They need to loosen up the regulations to make it easier for developers to build some frickin' houses, right? You're a developer, you agree?
Like them or not, but I'll tell you, one of the great things that Trump did was put those opportunity zones out there. Yeah. And the opportunity zones, who knows if they'll still be around under the new administration. But what that did is it took people could defer their capital gains into these opportunity zones, and that's the incentive that these developers needed, because now they can defer all their capital gains and be able to build, housing and other things that might be needed in areas that, also need it.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right, you guys want to take a few questions?
Sure. Yeah, let's do it.
Sounds good.
All right, and guys, if you have a question, just please start with the word question and then maybe say one of our names if it's specific to one of us. I'll just kind of try to go back up to the top of the stream here. Oh, let's see, what do we got?
But yeah, Ken, with what you were saying, I know you and George have repeated this often, and I love this saying, money always goes where it's treated best.
Right.
Money always goes where it's treated best.
Have you ever tried to build anything new in California?
No.
Because money isn't treated well there.
Yeah, good point. Let's see. All right, let me go to the bottom, right? Oh, well, I think I might know the answer to this, but Ken, have you thought about looking into the Dubai real estate market?
No, actually, I was talking to Anthem Blanchard last week about that. He's in Dubai.
It's amazing you know Anthem, by the way. That's so funny.
I just had him on my show. It's going to be coming out next week. But he's in Dubai, and I have not looked at it. Actually,
I don't know who he is. Is he looking?
He's a Bitcoin guy.
I need to introduce you to him. You'd really like him.
Yeah, a libertarian guy. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I started talking about real estate in Dubai like, Jason, 9 months ago, a year ago, something like that?
Yeah, I think Dubai is way too expensive and speculative. Talk about a bubble market.
No, listen, you can buy right now in the Burj Khalifa under the cost of construction.
Wow. No way. Really?
And
I've been to the Burj Khalifa. I took my mastermind group to Dubai a couple years ago.
Yeah, I mean, and that's their stated price. That's without even negotiating. And it's true that the RV ratios are garbage, but yeah. I want to go there just to see how much wiggle room there is on those prices.
I just would think Dubai is a highly speculative type of market,
But if you can buy under the cost of construction, if you can buy with a 1% RV ratio,
that's the key.
I mean, how speculative is that?
Well, you said the RV ratio didn't work though.
No. At their asking price, but that's like the same as Medellin.
Well, if you can get a 1% RV ratio, and I don't know what the tax regime is like there, or any, property taxes or anything, and utility bills, and they're just issues.
And also too, I need to define that because the way you and I look at RV ratio is a little different. I'm looking at cost basis, where you're looking at just market price. So my point was, if you've got a 0.5 or 0.7 RV at market price, but you can go in there and negotiate down to where your cost basis, you're getting a 1%. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Hey, if you can get a 1% RV ratio there, that sounds pretty interesting, but that's amazing to me. Now, the other thing you need to be cognizant of is the legal environment. So, I'm no expert on this. I don't know about Dubai that much, but I do remember reading an article saying that they have a funny court system where non-Muslims don't get rights and things like that. So, you just got to keep in mind, what if you have to, evict somebody or collect rent or enforce legal contracts? It's just something to know about. The U.S. is a very special market because it's got good rule of law and it's transparent. It's also, the U.S. has really good data. You don't have Zillow in all these other countries. You don't have clear, easy closing processes and recorded deeds where the prices and the comps. Everywhere I've looked at around the world, and I've looked at properties in many places, many countries, they have these, they call them off-plan developments. And you never know what anything's worth in these places without being a complete local specialist,
But see, that's what I like.
I agree, because you were in Colombia and in Ecuador, and you really lived there and knew the market, right?
Yeah, I knew it like the back of my hand. With I had the data just from doing the boots on the ground research. So someone would come in and sell, even the Colombian, they'd own their property for 20 years. They'd go to sell. They'd have no clue what it was worth. Yeah. The only measuring stick they'd have is what they paid for it, and it went up significantly in nominal prices, but real prices, it doesn't go up much. So let's say it's worth, they bought it for 50 grand. The going price is 200, but they don't know the going price.
So you pay them 51 and they're happy.
125 because they think that's a windfall.
Yeah.
And you go in there and pay 100 for it, they're happy. And you're buying $1 for 50 cents. So the more inefficient the market is, better. Sorry to cut you off there, Ken.
No. I was just going to say that I've had many friends going to other countries, and then the countries have changed the rules, and in some cases they had to walk from the real estate. So what Jason said is really important.
Yeah, thanks, Ken. And speaking of changing the rules, these stories in Dubai about how all these Lamborghinis and Ferraris were just abandoned on the side of the road because people were like rushing to get out at some certain time. I can't remember what that was all about, but so things can change. Like the U.S. changes really slowly, which we complain about, but it's good in some ways.
I don't know if it changes that slowly.
Well, the law doesn't change that quick here. I mean,
really?
Yeah. Well, Ken will tell you. I mean, Ken, when you were teaching people about real estate 10, 15 years ago, is it really very different today? I mean, I could play one of my old podcasts from 15 years ago tomorrow, and everything pretty much still applies, except the prices are different.
Well, and except for the fact that the government's locking everyone in their house and not allowing businesses.
Well, that's a black swan event. Okay.
That changed about 2 days, and you go from the United States to martial law.
Every 102 years, we're going to have a pandemic, George.
He said it. I didn't need it.
It's a pandemic.
Email.
Yeah. COVID-19 84.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, my employees bought me a gift for my birthday next weekend.
Yeah, George's birthday is next week, everybody.
It is. And so I thought it was really, really cool. They know I like pens, and like a Mont Blanc or something. And I don't know if you guys can see this.
We can see it. That looks like a nice pen.
Who's signed that?
It's a really nice like Mont Blanc type of pen, but it's a George Orwell.
Oh wow, that's
George
so
Orwell
cool.
pen, and it says, "In a time of deceit, telling the truth is a revolutionary act."
Yeah,
George
that's
Orwell.
a great quote. I love that quote.
And that quote from my employees, the people that do the work on the YouTube channel. FYI.
Awesome, and they do a great job.
Yeah, they do.
Okay, let's see. George, do you think about what do I think about investing in real estate in Venezuela? I like it. I think I would. I mean, I'm not saying just go in and just buy the first thing you see. Like to our point earlier, you have to be a local expert. If you're not a local expert, you're going to get your butt handed to you. You're going to lose a ton of money.
So you think Venezuela's hit bottom?
Well, I mean, it's not whether it's hit bottom or not. Is it cheap or is it expensive? And so I don't know where I'd start is that island they have off of, I forgot what it's called. Margarita Island, is it maybe? Something like that in Venezuela.
I like the Jimmy Buffett song.
Yeah, but I'd start looking at it. I mean, I wouldn't pull the trigger, but if you know the local market, if you know it like the back of your hand, if you're an expert, if you can take advantage of the market inefficiencies, I mean, I can't imagine it's cheap right now, but I don't know. All right, let me look at some more question. Okay, Ken, as an average Joe, I live in Southern California, and I'm looking to purchase my first home for my family. And when would be the best time to purchase a home? What do you think on that? And then Hartman or Jason, I know you have specific numbers you look at to make it more quantifiable as to whether or not you should buy or rent in your local area. But Ken, what are your thoughts on that? That was addressed to you. Sure.
Well, I think that obviously there's a big net migration out of California overall, but not in every city because so I think it's you first got to kind of I always tell people you got to be careful not to catch a falling knife. Like, you know what I mean? So you got to let the knife fall. And so in a lot of areas, I still think it's falling. So I don't know what area specifically. Southern California is a big area. Obviously one of the things that's driving the prices up right now is low inventory in some of those areas, but you're also seeing a lot more inventory in others. So it's very market specific, but I would bet that there's some deals over there because if you just follow the numbers, people are leaving, and I think that's going to continue over the next year for sure.
Yeah, Jason, what do you think? I tell people to, even if you're buying a home as an owner occupant, just look at the RV ratio. If the RV ratio is below 5, if it's 1, buy.
Yeah. So what George means by that is always, even if you're buying the house to live in, which you are in this case, always view it, at least consider it from an investor's point of view, right? And so if you look at, what are you going to need to pay for that property, and then what is the fair market rent on that property, then you have another way of sort of comping the property to know whether it's cheap or whether it's expensive, like George always says. So for example, if it's a $600,000 property in Southern California or wherever in the world, doesn't matter, and the fair market rent on that property is $3,000 a month, that would be a 0.5 RV or rent to value ratio. And that would be pretty low. Okay. That would mean that to rent that would be a good deal, but to own it and rent it to somebody else would not be a very good deal because it's only a 0.5 rent to value ratio. Now, Ken, in your apartments, and you probably don't look at this or think of it this way, but maybe you do, because you're looking at the whole huge deal, right? But if you had to take it down to just one unit, right? What's it cost to build one unit? Is that one apartment unit, say, $150,000, for example?
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
And how much would that one unit rent for? $1,300?
Yeah, $1,300 to $1,500, depending on the unit type. Okay. That would be a 1.
So you got 1% or close to 1% RV ratio on, maybe an apartment complex with 200 units in it, right?
Right.
So that's good. So that home, if it's only renting for $3,000 per month, it's expensive. Okay, that's how you know. If you can buy that house for $600,000 and the fair market rent is $4,500 per month, then you're looking at a 0.75 RV, right? And that's better. That's pretty good. But buying a home is, obviously an emotional decision. And you can't look at, if you have the money, if you're not like scraping to do it, then, the whole point of making money is to buy what you want, right? Not everything has to make sense anymore. You can do nonsensical things. As I've always said, invest in places that make sense so you can afford to live in places that don't make sense.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's a good point for sure.
And I've been to Ken McElroy's home, and believe me, it does not make sense.
Terrible RV ratio.
It's very nice, but it would not rent for anywhere near the value.
Well, look at the place I'm renting right now. Yeah. I mean, my goodness, this guy, I don't know if I've told you, Jason, but the place I'm renting, not only is it furnished, I don't even pay utilities.
Yeah.
Internet, all inclusive. And I would guess it's, that
place is probably worth $700,000, $800,000.
More than that.
Oh, really? I haven't kept track of it. Yeah. Because I know the building you're in. You're in the building where John McCain used to have a place.
Yeah.
It's a nice building.
This RV is garbage. Anyway, but it's great for me.
Yeah, no, see, it's better to be the tenant a lot of times. The higher you go up on the price scale, the better it will almost always be to be a tenant than an owner. Okay. Yeah. And what you do, if you have cash, you take that cash and you buy a bunch of inexpensive properties that you rent to other people that have really favorable RV ratios for you, the investor, right? And then you're arbitraging both sides.
Yeah. So this question is for me, but Ken, I think it's probably better for you. I might just punt this one. It says, George, what is a good price per acre on undeveloped land? And I don't play that. I don't really like the undeveloped land game. I think that's more. Do you have any idea on that?
Yep,
what would you say?
Yeah. So there's a few things. Usually land is more expensive in the city core. At least it used to be. So you're going to find it could be 1 to 5 million an acre, like downtown in a lot of downtowns. As you move out, it's going to be a lot less. And then, of course, it goes to farmland. So it just depends. The big issue is always around zoning. So every apartment deal we do is based on contingent zoning. So we never buy 15 or 20 acres without knowing that we're going to be able to put 200 or 300 or 400 unit apartment community on it. So we'll have it in escrow a long period of time. We might pay, say, $8 to $10 a foot for something like that. So my range right now on stuff that we're looking for in Phoenix is $8 to $10 a foot, and land is 43,560, I think, square foot per acre. So you can kind of back into the math. So call it, 350 to 450,000 an acre. But obviously, it depends on what you want to do on it. I have a good friend that George. He does farmland. He kills it. He buys. He goes and buys his farmland and then and leases it to these guys that want to farm on it. So it's great. So there's a lot of things you can do with land.
I got a lot of buddies that do that in Kansas City, and I have other buddies that do the same thing, and they actually get a great return by renting their land out to deer hunters.
Yep.
And I didn't even know that was a thing.
Yep, they do it in Texas.
When people hunt deer, they like track them for like 2 years. And I had no clue, but so they want the same piece of land for like 2 years, and they actually will pay rent so they can go track the deer on that land, and they get a decent return.
Wow. Well, but you guys, we've looked into farmland many, many times over the years, and we have a client who finances farmland, and he's buying residential properties through us. And we have looked and looked, and we've talked to farmland brokers, and it seems like they're just never good yields on those properties. They're really low cap rates, and now Bill Gates is in the market buying up everything, but I think that's for a more conspiratorial reason. We can go there if you want.
Him and Klaus are setting up a private equity firm to buy all that.
Well, he's going to genetically engineer our food and make our genes infertile and make us go extinct because he wants to lower the population. But Ken, are you agreeing or not? Or are you looking the other way like, Jason, shut up?
I had a guy on my podcast that he does chickpeas or hummus, He does 1 million bags a month.
Wow.
So think 1,000,000 100-pound bags a month. So he's got massive farmland, and he knows, as long as you know your number, he knows what he can yield. He knows what he can pay, and he's been growing like crazy and buying land like crazy as he expands. Because hummus has really obviously grown, and now they're going to do all this stuff. You should check it out. They've got like hummus milk, because it doesn't have any, it's really good for you, and all these other things. So there's all this stuff coming out that he's on the front side of by doing farmland.
So we'll get to that.
But I mean, the yields.
What do you think I did my thumb today?
What's that?
Jason, what do you think I did my thumb today?
Oh, ouch. That looks like it hurts. I don't know what you did. Oh, what, did you get a COVID test or something? Or no, that's not a COVID test. I don't know.
A 9mm?
Yeah, my thumb.
Oh, you went shooting.
Yeah. I went down to the gun range. I was firing.
Scottsdale Gun Club?
No, I went to some place in the hood, right off of 17.
That's where you got that crappy alcohol you're drinking.
Yeah, exactly. I went in there with the bag of the St. Ides 40. But now, you know how you're supposed to put your thumb on the side? I totally forgot. I put my thumb right behind it.
That hurts. I've done it. Yeah.
Just jacked my thumb. But anyway, okay. So here's a question for both of you that I'd be curious to get your thoughts on. How will moratoriums affect the market once people have to start making their rents again? Will mass foreclosures take place? Can the Fed let that happen?
Ken, you got a lot to say about that.
Yeah. So we're right around, the number I've heard 15 million. I've heard, over 20 on the eviction side. So that's kicked out to March. And then on the forbearance side, we have a couple million people that are seriously delinquent. And, the good news, if there is any, is some of those houses have gone up in price. So if you really look at the numbers, they actually have made it up in equity. They just haven't been able to make the payment. So, but they're not really financeable, would be my guess. So I do think we're going to see a lot of inventory hit the market next year. I don't see how I don't know if you guys saw California, I think passed a law or has tried to pass a law that they get first right of refusal on foreclosures. Did you see that?
Yeah, I saw that. That's
California.
The state?
Yeah.
Yeah. California is moving into absolute communism. I mean, the government is playing way too big a role. They are totally overstepping their bounds. But
that's great reset stuff. That's 20. You'll own nothing and you'll be happy. Remember?
If that happens, then it'll be a really soft landing for all.
But what they're doing, their excuse for that, Ken, is that they're saying, well, we want to preserve the opportunity for first-time buyers or disadvantaged people. Now, of course, they'll have their politically correct definition of who's disadvantaged,
right?
And it definitely won't be, anybody with certain skin colors, right? Like white is what I mean. My group will be discriminated against for sure. That's what will happen.
And, I was talking about how, well, I won't go into it on this video too much, but how I think the definition of domestic terrorist is just being expanded.
Oh, yeah. Oh, if you're a Republican, you're a terrorist now. Yeah. Apparently.
Yeah, exactly. and the people on the other side said, well, that's because they deserve it. But I always say that's fine. But be very careful with that, because the same power that you give the government to shut down Trump supporters is the exact same power that you're giving them that would allow them to shut down a group that you may be in favor of, such as Black Lives Matter or Antifa or anything like that. So
that requires too much foresight, George. The people that are doing that, they don't have that kind of foresight. They're just happy, their guy won, and they just want to get vengeance on the losing people, instead of just celebrating like, hey, we won. Let's, we're in power now. Let's celebrate. They're just being vindictive. It's crazy.
Yeah,
scary.
It goes back to tribalism. Yeah. Okay, let's see here. I don't want to take it back to real estate, so I don't want to get too far off topic.
But my point of the California thing, though, was that, the government, whenever they do something, they always claim it's like for a cause, it's for our own good, it's for our own protection, and this one, they're using the excuse of the first-time buyers, right? And, we've all seen how disastrous rent control is, for example. And all rent control ultimately does is it just leads to housing shortages. Right. I mean, show me a place that's had a long history of rent control that has an abundant housing supply.
Like rent control fixed the problem.
Yeah, rent control made the problem. I mean, it's just a disaster.
Yeah, so here's a question, and I get this frequently from the Canadian folks or maybe the Australian folks. And Jason, you've probably thought about this. Ken, I don't know if you've given this much thought, but bottom line is Canadian real estate, specifically urban areas, have had massive year-to-year price gains. What is the best move for young, well earners hesitant to buy a primary residence and hold? Look for cash flow elsewhere, ? And Jason, I know you actually work with a lot of Canadian investors that are looking into the United States for maybe a little bit better opportunity, less downside, because we know that Canadian market is in just a huge bubble along with Australia. Ken, do you have any thoughts on the Canadian market?
Yeah, I've been up there a lot, and it goes through cycles just like the U.S. market. But the thing about when a market gets hot, there's plenty of places to find cash flow deals. It's just might not be in your particular submarket, and so that's pretty normal. That's why what we'd like to do is we like to invest in multiple markets, because like right now, Austin is hotter than hot in the United States, but 10 years ago it wasn't. And you got other areas that are hot and are not. And so I think that's just part of real estate investing. Markets get hot and they get trendy, and then they don't. So it's just the wrong time in the cycle, it sounds like. But investing in Canada is not any different than it is a little bit different on the mortgage side, but it's really not that much different.
Yeah,
right.
You don't get the great mortgages like you do in the U.S. though. Right. And I mean, you didn't say it, Ken, but do you think the Canadian major cities they're just overvalued, if you ask me?
Without a doubt. I mean, I grew up in Seattle. We used to go up to Vancouver all the time. I go there still all the time. And it's just crazy high. I think one thing that is interesting, George, is I made a bunch of money for my Canadian investors when they came into the market in mid 2000, because it was a Canadian dollar. The U.S. dollar and the Canadian dollar was kind of par at the time.
All right.
And now it's dropped. And so not only did they make money in U.S. real estate, but then they made money on the
exchange.
On the exchange, and it was like 30 to 40%, depending on when we exited on just the exchange, and so that's something I think that people can lose sight of. Between the countries, there's a lot you can do just by watching the dollar, and you can use that arbitrage as well.
Yeah, and I'd argue the dollar.
Australian investors have definitely taken advantage of that when it's applicable too. Yeah.
Yeah, Jason, can you expand on that just momentarily? Because as American investors, or as Americans, period, I think 99% of people assume that 30-year fixed rate mortgages are just everywhere. It's just the free market creating a mortgage. And they don't understand that that is not a product of the free market, because banks are almost guaranteed to lose money, which means the borrower is almost guaranteed to make money because of the purchasing power difference and paying it back with cheaper dollars. But no bank would do that in the real world, because they know they're going to lose money. Can you kind of expand on that, how our market is subsidized and opportunities, especially consumer price inflation?
So after the Great Depression of the 30s, the government, in its infinite wisdom, sponsored an entity, and they called it Fannie Mae. And they basically, the stated mission of Fannie Mae was to expand access to home ownership, which I believe is still its stated mission. And so what it did is it started offering these extremely desirable mortgages. And these 30-year fixed rate mortgages now, especially, but even in the past, have been these huge wealth creators for people. And it only applies to 1 to 4 units, which is considered residential. When you go 5 units or more, you're in Ken's domain, which is, commercial properties. Now you could go 500 units, but just 5 or more is considered commercial. So, and there are Fannie Mae plays in that area too, but not in the same way. Okay. And so these fantastic 30-year fixed rate mortgages are right now literally at negative interest rates. So when you subtract real inflation, which George and Ken will both tell you is much higher than the stated inflation rate that the government would like us to believe of, 1 to 2 to 2.5%, which is, what the government will tell you in and out. And they manipulate that in 3 ways: through weighting, hedonics, and substitution. So they understate the inflation rate intentionally. So you're borrowing at this incredibly low rate. The interest is tax deductible, and inflation devalues that interest rate too. So you're literally getting paid to borrow, even if the property is vacant and produces no income. But what if it does produce income? Then it is phenomenal. It is like the most incredible thing. Not only are you getting paid to borrow the money, but then you stick a renter in there and you tell them, pay the mortgage plus on a single family home, pay me $200 extra per month. And then give me all these tax benefits because it's the most tax favored asset class in America. Yeah. And that's why it is the best investment ever. And I have a sound effect for that.
You're basically getting paid to short the dollar. And Ken and I were actually talking to Kiyosaki about this the other day, how it's almost like the property, if you look at someone's balance sheet, the property has become the liability and the debt has become the asset. And it's just, it's a bizarre world we live in. But
it is a bizarre world, but the debt is a huge asset. So you don't want to pay these properties off. You want to keep these incredible 3-decade-long fixed rate mortgages. Think about it, folks. It's 2021. If you get a 30-year fixed rate mortgage today, right, you won't be required to make the last payment on that until 2051.
Yeah, what's the dollar going to be worth then?
It's going to be worth nothing. We may not even have a dollar then. Okay. I mean, it's going to be so debased through inflation. And I'll just give you an example. People that borrowed a 30-year fixed rate mortgage in 1972, by the time, and a dollar was worth a dollar in 1972, right? That was a year after we went off the gold standard. Right. But by 2001, when they made the last payment on that mortgage, that dollar was only worth 24 cents. So everybody that bought the median price single family home in 1972, the millions of people that did that, okay, and got a 30-year fixed rate mortgage at the time, 7.37%. By the time that 30 years ended, they not only lived in that home for free, they actually got paid to live there. They got paid 1.16% after inflation and tax benefits to live in the house. They got paid to live there.
Yeah, I mean, you've said so many times that if you could just get the 30-year fixed rate mortgage without the property, you'd take it.
Yeah. I'd take it all day long. But I do like the income from the property. So it's not.
I was doing some research after we talked last, George, and after the U.S. was in the war in the 40s, we had massive debt. Not like today, but we had a lot as compared to that period of time. And what the Fed did is they relaxed inflation, and it went up. I think the average was 4.5, somewhere in there. And in that 10-year period, they lowered the public debt by 40% by letting the inflation go. And so that's what I think is going to happen. I think all this debt's going to stack up. And then they're going to let that inflation line out, and it's going to go down. The problem is that these people that are on fixed incomes like Social Security,
it's terrible.
They're going to get really hurt. It's going to be horrible in that area. But that's what I think is going to happen next.
Yeah, that's the best business plan, is to pay off your debt through inflation. And so what I always say is, as investors, we want to align our interest with the two most powerful forces the world has ever known: governments and central banks. Yeah. And governments like to spend too much money, and central banks, make the whole thing possible. And so they're going to inflate their way out of the debt. It's the only thing they can do.
Yeah. Okay. So guys, we'll probably wrap things up here. Let's do another question I got, and it's right in Ken's wheelhouse, although this is kind of residential, but they're right here in Arizona, Ken, which is why I wanted to touch on this one. It says, Ken, any pointers on buying land and a new build in Fountain Hills? First time home buyer, about $500 in cash available.
He knows Fountain Hills.
Yeah, I do. the thing is you got to know that you're going to spend at least $200 to $300 a foot to build a house, and plus the land. And so then right now those numbers are making sense. And we're seeing in Fountain Hill specifically, there's a bunch of specs all over the place. And so obviously the variables are, interest rates. They won't fix them during a construction loan, and the components that we started talking about earlier, lumber and all the other pieces. And I also think that we might see some subcontractors not make it, through this period of time. And that is actually also going to be another negative, and it could potentially drive some prices up.
Yeah. Okay. So I just want to address this one thing here before we say our goodbyes and get off to the fight. And I'm going to get off to my bottle of Cristal here. But, we've been talking about taking how the debt's good. And if you got some equity, you might want to refi at a 30-year fixed rate. This person is saying, but what do you do with the home equity? And I've heard a lot of people say, oh, yeah, it's a great idea, George. I'm going to go out and take all my home equity out and buy Bitcoin. Or I'm going to take out all my home equity and buy silver or buy gold. And, I think Bitcoin's a great speculation. I think everyone should own gold for an insurance policy. But I want to be clear that when Ken and Jason and myself are talking about these things, we're not saying that just your average Joe go out there and do it. We're saying these could be good ideas on paper, but you got to know what you're doing. You got to have some degree of sophistication. You have to be willing to do the homework in order to do this well and have a mathematical edge on your side. But if you're thinking about doing this, the bottom line is I would love to get your guys' opinion on this. If you're going to take out that equity, you got to buy something or put it to work in an asset that pays you enough to own it in order to make the mortgage payment. See, if you take that money out and now you've got a mortgage payment but don't have any cash flow to subsidize it, you got a negative carry on that mortgage. It's not being put into a productive asset. I would argue that that's probably not a good game plan. But if you can take out that equity and buy a piece of real estate that's cheap, as an example, and where you're getting a good RV ratio, you got good positive cash flow to cover that mortgage payment, it could make sense. If you take that equity out, buy a good dividend paying stock now, let's say in a commodity space that's paying you 8 or 10% to own it, and therefore you can take that dividend, pay the mortgage payment, and you still have a positive carry, and you're limiting your downside because you can only lose so much equity because you've pulled it out of the house at 80% loan to value. So what do you guys think about that?
Well, I tell you, I think Kiyosaki said it best. He's like, he wanted to go buy a Porsche. And Kim said, no. Don't buy the Porsche. Buy a property that pays for the Porsche. That's what we're talking about.
Yeah.
So take that equity, match it up with debt, and then use the cash flow, for that kind of investing, because now you're using other people's money. So that's the way to think. Whenever I want something, I use equity to try to figure out how to pay for it. I don't just buy it. You don't want to buy depreciating assets.
Yeah. And my thing is, especially depreciating that have a negative carry. My goodness, double whammy. Jason, what do you think?
Well, like Ken said, and Robert says, it's a doodad, right? And if you want to buy a doodad, buy something first that's going to pay for the doodad.
Yeah.
So
nothing wrong with doodads. Yeah. But use debt. That's the whole point of this talk is use debt, match it up with that equity.
Yeah.
I just get concerned if people take out that equity and use it for something that isn't going to pay them. All of a sudden they've $500,000 mortgage they have to pay off because we told them to take out that equity, but they use the $500,000 to buy a piece of land, as an example, that's not paying them, or they use it to buy gold that isn't paying them, so they have to come out of pocket for that mortgage payment. That's my point, and that would be my.
Well, George, the show we did a long time ago when I was on your show, I don't know, like a year ago, we did a show about refi till you die, and we say, take that money out and buy more properties with it. And Ken, he illustrates that as well. And you call it infinite. What do you call
infinite? It? Yeah, infinite return.
Infinite.
Yep.
And he's got T-shirts for that too.
Yeah, that's right. Once you have your cash out, then it's free.
Yeah. All right.
So awesome. take the equity out, get control of it, but don't be irresponsible with it. Use that equity, depending on how big a cushion you have. If you have a whole bunch of cushions everywhere, then go buy a boat, fine. But that's, not a good idea, but, it is if you can afford it. But otherwise, buy income property with it, or, dividend paying stocks or something that's going to
pay. Hey, Mark's here.
What?
Mark's here. Mark Moss.
Oh, hey, Mark.
Hey, Mark. What's going on, buddy?
He's on
Thanks
the chat?
Yeah, I think so. And
hey.
I guess he's joining us from Puerto Rico. Very cool, Mark. Hope you're well, buddy. Thanks. In fact, Mark's probably watching the UFC fight tonight for sure. But all right.
I talked to him today on Voxer.
Yeah.
All right. So let's do some shout outs here. We'll go to the end of the chat, guys. Thanks for hanging out. Gentlemen, we had almost 2,000 people.
Wow.
That's awesome.
So, pretty cool. If you think about, what we'd have to do to speak in front of a room of 2,000 people, that would be a lot harder back in the day than it is now.
These are our logistics. This is it.
Yeah. There you go. All right. So first and foremost, we've got our great buddy Mark Moss in the house. We've got Eagle Deal Donkey on Twitter, Matt Linton, Ian Niculuso, I think, Freedom Stacker, Roddy Cardona Valderrama, RR, David Armstrong, Juggernaut, All Night Heater, Ian, I think I said Ian, Danny,
George, before you keep going, you got to ask everybody to smash the like button and leave a comment below and tell us where you're watching from.
Okay. Well, there you go. Jason did it for me. So. All right. Okay. And I think that's it, guys. I'm going to get off to UFC 257. You guys enjoy your evening. Thanks for hanging out with us. And we will, all three of us will see you on the next video.
See you
Thanks,
guys.
Ken. Thanks, George. Thanks, everybody.
Enjoy the fight.
Bye.